When my daughter said, "Mom, he taught her a lesson," I felt a sharp ache, not in my arm, but deep in my chest. I had just returned from the hospital, my arm in a sling, still swollen and stiff. I thought today could be simple, just a quiet dinner together, a few soft words, maybe a small smile. Viewers, I need a small favor from you. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. It really helps me, and I can bring more stories like this to you. But instead, her voice, calm yet piercing, made me feel smaller than I had in years. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the words got stuck somewhere in my throat. I remembered the accident, the slip on the wet kitchen floor, the sharp sound of my body hitting the tile, the rush of panic in my husband's eyes as he caught me. It hurt, yes, but not as much as what she just said. I sat at the table, my arm heavy in its sling, trying to smile. "I'm fine," I whispered. But her gaze wasn't on me. She was looking at him. And I realized there was a conversation happening, one I wasn't part of, one that I didn't even know existed. And that invisible wall between us hurt more than the cast on my arm. I've always considered our home a safe place, a small, cozy house where every corner held a memory. My husband, David, has always been practical, steady, a man of few words but warm gestures. Our daughter, Emily, is 14 now. She's grown into a smart, confident girl, but lately, I've noticed a subtle distance between us, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I remember the mornings when Emily would curl up at the kitchen counter with her cereal while I packed her lunch. We'd talk about school, friends, small things, nothing monumental, but enough to feel connected. But in the past few months, her words had changed. Polite, yes, but there was an edge I couldn't place, as if she had learned a lesson I didn't know I was teaching, or maybe one she was learning from someone else. Never overbearing. He helped me around the house, especially after I had to slow down due to my health issues last year. He would handle groceries, fix things that broke, and make sure Emily had everything she needed. But he has a quiet way of handling problems, sometimes too quiet. I've often wondered if his silence hides more than it reveals. 2 nights before the accident, Emily and I had a small disagreement. Nothing serious. She wanted a later curfew for a school event, and I insisted on the usual rules. She sulked, I sighed, and we didn't speak for the rest of the evening. I thought it was just teenage stubbornness. I never imagined it would ripple into something heavier, something I'd feel at the dinner table with a broken arm. The day of the accident started like any other Saturday. I was tidying up the kitchen, humming a quiet tune, when my foot slipped on a wet spot near the sink. I remember the moment in slow motion, the thud as I hit the floor, the shock, and the sudden pain in my arm. David rushed in immediately, checking me over, making sure I wasn't seriously hurt. Emily watched from the doorway, silent, her arms crossed. I thought she was just worried, but now I see she was watching something else too, something I wasn't part of. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed a clean break, set my arm in a cast, and warned me to take it easy. David drove us home, quiet, glancing at Emily in the back seat, and I noticed a tension that hadn't been there before. She didn't speak to me, didn't ask how I was feeling. She only followed us inside, set her bag down, and went to her room. I tried to keep the atmosphere calm that evening. I prepared a simple dinner, the kind of comfort food we all used to enjoy together. But when I sat down at the table, my arm aching and my spirits low, Emily's words hit me like an unexpected storm. "Mom, he taught her a lesson." I paused, fork in hand, staring at her. I wanted to ask who she meant, what lesson she was talking about, but my voice felt weak. The room felt smaller, colder, though David sat across from me, quietly, with his usual calm expression. He looked like he understood something I didn't, something unspoken. And that's when I realized the quiet, the distance, the edge in Emily's voice, all of it, was part of a story I hadn't yet been told. A story where I wasn't the main character, where my presence at the table wasn't enough to fill the space that had been quietly claimed by someone else, or perhaps by a lesson I wasn't ready to understand. Khan tried to smile, tried to focus on the warmth of the kitchen lights, the soft hum of the fridge, the familiar scent of home. But my heart was already beginning to feel the weight of what was coming. And deep down I knew this was only the beginning. After that evening, the house felt different. Even the familiar sounds, the ticking clock, the soft hum of the fridge, the distant traffic outside, seemed sharper somehow. I couldn't shake the words Emily had said. He taught her a lesson. Every time I looked at her, I felt a quiet distance I couldn't cross, a wall I hadn't seen before. Minimized, I tried to get into our usual rhythm. David made breakfast, careful not to jostle my arm as he carried plates to the table. Emily was unusually quiet, poking at her cereal without speaking. I tried to start a conversation. "How's school today? Any homework?" "Nothing special," she muttered, barely looking up. Her tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't warm either. I realized that I had grown used to her teenage indifference over the years, but this was different. There was an edge in her voice, a sort of calm defiance that made me uneasy. I wondered what had happened the day before, or maybe the day before that I didn't know about. David didn't say much. He just nodded, eyes on his coffee, as if waiting for something. I sensed that whatever had occurred between him and Emily, it wasn't something I was meant to know, at least not yet. And that thought hurt more than anything. Days passed, and small moments of tension began to pile up. I noticed Emily watching me from across the room, as if measuring how I reacted to her presence. She would make a comment about chores or my inability to lift something because of the cast, and though she sounded casual, I could hear a kind of judgment in her words. One afternoon, I asked her softly, "Emily, did something happen between you and your dad yesterday?" She looked at me for a long moment, her lips pressed together, and then said quietly, "Mum, it's complicated." Her words, calm as they were, felt like a gentle push. Not cruel, not mean, but enough to remind me that I was standing outside of something that had already happened, a lesson she had learned, a secret I wasn't part of. I tried to focus on small tasks around the house, things I could do with one hand, folding laundry, watering plants, tidying up shelves. But every corner of the house reminded me of how fragile our rhythm had become. Even David seemed quieter, more careful, as if tiptoeing around a tension I didn't understand. That weekend, I attempted to bridge the gap. I suggested we all go for a short walk to get some fresh air and talk. Emily hesitated, then agreed, but I could see the way she kept her distance, walking a step ahead or behind, never next to me. During the walk, I tried gently. "Emily, I just want to understand. I don't want to be left out." She looked at me, eyes clear and serious. "Mum, it's not about leaving you out. I just needed to learn something, and Dad helped me understand it. Her words were calm, but they cut through me. I wanted to ask what she had learned, what kind of lesson she needed that my presence or words couldn't give. But I didn't. I just nodded, feeling both pride and heartbreak. Pride because she was growing into someone who could understand complex things. Heartbreak because I realized I wasn't part of that moment. Back at home, the tension lingered. Emily retreated to her room more than usual. I could hear her voice through the door, quiet and serious, talking to David. I didn't eavesdrop, but the sound was enough. Soft tones of guidance, firm words, the calm authority of a father. And I, with my broken arm, could only watch from the doorway, invisible, powerless. The days blurred into a pattern of small conflicts. My attempts to connect with Emily, helping with homework, asking about friends, even making her favourite smacks, were met with polite but distant responses. David remained quietly supportive, but I began to sense a divide between father and daughter, one that I couldn't bridge no matter how hard I tried. One evening, while preparing dinner with one hand, I overheard Emily say to David, "I think she doesn't understand where this was important. She always thinks she needs to fix everything." Congressional. My arm aching, not just from the cast, but from the sting of her words. I knew she wasn't trying to be cruel. Teenagers have their ways of expressing themselves, their subtle honesty. But still, hearing it so clearly made me feel like I had been sidelined. David glanced at me briefly, then back to Emily. "She's doing her best," he said softly. "But sometimes we all need to learn in our own way." I realized then that whatever lesson he had taught her, it was not about punishment. It was guidance, a quiet, patient lesson about life, choices, and understanding. And yet, even knowing that didn't ease the sense of being excluded. I wanted to be part of her learning, part of her growth, but I wasn't. That night, I lay in bed, my arm propped on pillows, listening to the house settle. I thought about how relationships shift quietly, sometimes without words. I thought about Emily's words, her tone, the way she looked at me. And I felt a mixture of love, concern, and the ache of being left behind in a moment that mattered deeply to both of them. The rising tension wasn't loud, it wasn't shouting or anger. It was quiet, subtle, and persistent. It was the small silences at the table, the careful phrasing of words, the way Emily and David shared glances that I wasn't part of. And it built slowly, steadily, into a feeling I couldn't ignore, a feeling that something was about to reach a breaking point. I didn't know it yet, but the next week would bring a moment that would change how I saw both of them, how I saw myself, and how I understood what it really meant to be a family. The following week, the tension in the house became almost tangible. Every small sound, Emily's footsteps on the stairs, the clink of dishes, the faint hum of the washing machine, felt louder, sharper, as if reminding me that I was standing outside of something important. I tried to distract myself with books, television, small household chores, anything that could keep my mind from dwelling too deeply on the distance I felt from my daughter. But deep down, I knew I couldn't avoid it for long. It was a Thursday evening. I had just finished making dinner, my arm still heavy and sore, and I placed the plates carefully on the table. David and Emily sat across from me. The air felt different that night, heavier, as if something unspoken was about to surface. Emily picked up her fork, paused, and looked at me. Her gaze wasn't cold, but it carried a weight I couldn't quite understand. "Mom, do you remember last month when I messed up at school?" "Yes, honey. I know you tried your best. We all make mistakes." She swallowed and looked at David, who nodded back at her, silently encouraging her to speak. And then she said the words that would change everything for me. He helped me. He taught me how to face it. He showed me what I should have done, and I finally understood. Her voice was calm, but I felt it pierce through me like a cold wind. I realized she was talking about her father, my husband, David, and that whatever lesson he had given her, it had been private, shared between them, without me. Emily, what do you mean? I asked softly, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked down at her plate, fidgeting with her fork. Mom, you weren't here when I needed help the most. I was confused, scared, and Dad, he showed me what to do. He taught me how to handle it without blaming myself. That's what I meant when I said he taught me a lesson. I wanted to say something, to reach across the table and hold her hand, but my arm was still in a cast. I felt powerless, not just physically, but emotionally. For so long, I had thought I was the one teaching her, guiding her through life. But now I realized there were moments I had missed. Moments where she had needed someone else, someone who could reach her in ways I couldn't. Crimson spoke then, his voice gentle but firm. She needed guidance, yes, but not punishment. I just wanted her to understand that mistakes happen to all of us, and the important thing is to learn from them. I didn't exclude you, I just wanted to support her in a different way. His words were calm, but they brought tears to my eyes. I wanted to be proud, to feel relief, but all I could feel was a strange mix of emotions, love, regret, and a quiet ache of being left out. Emily continued, her voice soft. Mom, I love you. You know that. But sometimes we need help in ways that only Dad can give me. And I think I needed that lesson from him more than I realized. I nodded, swallowing hard. I could feel the weight of the lesson, not just for Emily, but for me as well. I had been so focused on being present, on fixing things, on being the perfect mother, that I hadn't realized that guidance can come in many forms, and sometimes it doesn't look like what we expect. The evening stretched on in silence, but it was no longer heavy. Instead, it carried a quiet understanding, fragile but real. I realized that this turning point wasn't about betrayal or exclusion, it was about growth. Emily had learned, David had guided, and I had to learn too. That night, after Emily went to her room, I stayed in the kitchen with David. We didn't speak much. Words weren't necessary. I could feel his support, his patience, his quiet understanding. And I knew that this moment, the lesson, the revelation, the quiet tension, wasn't an ending, but a beginning. I thought about the past week, the distance, the subtle silences, the moments where I had felt powerless. I understood now that life doesn't always let us be at the center of every lesson or every moment. Sometimes we watch from the sidelines and that's okay. It doesn't make us any less loved or any less important. The next few days were still quiet, but the heaviness had lifted slightly. Emily began to smile again, though more thoughtfully this time. She included me in small things, asking for advice, sharing her school stories, even laughing at little jokes I hadn't heard in a while. The distance was still there, but it felt like a bridge was slowly forming. And I realized something else, that lessons don't only belong to those who give them. Sometimes they belong to those who learn. And sometimes they belong to those who watch, reflect, and understand their own place in the story. I thought back to the day of my accident, the slip on the floor, the broken arm, and the quiet dinner afterward. I realized that even in pain and exclusion, there can be understanding. Even in silence, there can be growth. And even in moments of quiet tension, love can persist, patient and resilient. By the end of the week, I felt a strange sense of calm. Emily and I were not as close as we had been before, not yet, but we were on our way. And David's quiet guidance had taught me something too, that being a mother doesn't mean controlling every lesson or every outcome. Sometimes it means stepping back, trusting, and letting others play their part in shaping the hearts we love most. That turning point, quiet, painful, and full of realization, was the moment I truly understood what family really meant. It wasn't about always being at the center. It wasn't about being perfect or always in control. It was about love, patience, and the willingness to learn and grow together, even when the lessons don't come in the way we expect. After that turning point, the house felt lighter, though not completely healed. The tension between Emily and me didn't disappear overnight, but a small bridge had begun to form. It was subtle, the way she smiled when I walked into the room, the way she asked for my help on small things, or even just the quiet presence she offered when she sat near me. These small moments were powerful, more than any words could describe. David, too, seemed different in his calm way. He didn't lecture or direct anymore. He simply supported, quietly encouraging both of us to find our way back to each other. I realized then that his lesson for Emily wasn't about teaching her obedience or control. It was about guiding her to understand herself, to face her mistakes, and to grow. And in seeing her learn, I too was learning. One evening, Emily came to me while I was resting on the couch, arm propped on pillows. She held a small notebook in her hands, looking nervous but determined. "Mum, can I show you something?" she asked. I nodded, curious. She opened the notebook and handed it to me. Inside were her reflections, her notes about school, her thoughts about mistakes, and, most importantly, her feelings. In one section, she had written about me, about how I always tried to help, how I loved her deeply, and how sometimes I didn't realize that letting go could be a lesson too. Tears welled in my eyes as I read her words. I realized that she had been learning not just from her father, but also from me, learning about love, patience, and trust. And in that moment, I understood something important. Lessons can come from many sources, and each one has value. The next few days, Emily and I spent more time together. Not in long, forced conversations, but in quiet companionship. We cooked together, folded laundry, watered the garden. We even started watching old movies on the couch, something we hadn't done in months. Each small interaction helped rebuild what had been fragile. David often watched us, quietly, with a small smile. He never took credit for the changes. He simply allowed the space for healing to happen. And that, I realized, was part of his lesson too. Sometimes the most important guidance is in the quiet support we offer, the patience we show, and the love we give without expecting immediate results. One afternoon, as I was sitting at the kitchen table, Emily came in with a small tray of cookies she had baked herself. She placed them in front of me, a shy smile on her face. "I thought you might like these," she said softly. I looked at her, my heart full. "Thank you, honey. They look amazing," I replied, feeling a warmth that had been absent for too long. She sat down across from me and said, "Mum, I know I said things that hurt, and I know I didn't always include you when I should have. I'm sorry." I reached out with my good hand and held hers. "Emily, there's nothing to be sorry for. I'm proud of you, and I understand now. Sometimes we need different kinds of guidance, and that's okay." We smiled at each other, a quiet understanding passing between us. It wasn't dramatic or exaggerated. It was simple, real, and heartfelt. And in that moment, I realized that family isn't about perfection or control. It's about connection, understanding, and the patience to let each other grow. The following week, I took Emily to her school event, something she had been looking forward to for months. As we walked together, arm in sling but heart full, she leaned slightly toward me and whispered, "Thanks, Mum, for letting me learn my way." I hugged her gently. "Always, Emily. Always." That night, as I sat in my favorite chair, David beside me, I reflected on everything that had happened. The accident, the tension, the lesson, and the turning point. I realized that the experience had changed all of us. Emily had grown more confident, more self-aware. David had shown patience and guidance without imposing control. And I had learned to step back, to trust, and to understand that love isn't about always being at the center. It's about allowing others to find their own path while we quietly support them. I thought about the lessons we all carry in life. Sometimes they come wrapped in accidents, misunderstandings, or moments of distance. Sometimes they are given quietly, without fanfare, but they leave a mark that shapes us forever. And sometimes the lessons we watch unfold teach us more than the ones we experience directly. I realized that my broken arm, which at first felt like a burden, had become a symbol. A symbol of patience, of humility, and of the quiet strength it takes to support those we love, even when we feel sidelined. It reminded me that love doesn't always demand attention or recognition. Sometimes it simply asks us to be present, to trust, and to be patient. Emily and I slowly rebuilt our bond. We talked more, laughed more, and even shared small secrets with each other again. The house, once heavy with tension, now carried warmth. It wasn't perfect, and our relationship wasn't flawless, but it was real, and that mattered more than anything. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table, David quietly remarked, "You both have come a long way." I smiled at him. Yes, we have, and it was a lesson for all of us. Emily reached over and held my hand, her eyes shining. "Thanks, Mum, for always being there, even when I didn't see it." I felt a lump in my throat and nodded. "And thank you, Emily, for letting me learn how to step back and understand you better." In that moment, I understood the true meaning of family. Patience, understanding, love, and the quiet courage to let others grow, even when it means watching from the sidelines. We all have lessons to learn, and sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that teach us about ourselves. As I looked at my daughter and husband, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in weeks. The accident, the tension, the lesson, it had all brought us closer in a way I hadn't expected. And I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, our family could face them with patience, love, and quiet understanding. I hope that anyone watching this story understands one thing. Love isn't about control or perfection. It's about presence, support, and the willingness to let those we love grow, even if it means stepping back. Life will always bring lessons, sometimes in unexpected ways, but if we approach them with patience, empathy, and quiet strength, we can come out stronger, closer, and more connected than before. And that's the story of how my husband taught her a lesson, and how I, in turn, learned one too.